All right, let's get back into this. We're starting here with the Battle of Iwo Jima. That's how you say it, Iwo Jima. Very awkward. Bear with me. All right, Battle of Iwo Jima. You might be thinking to yourself, I've never heard of this thing a day in my life, and you might be true, but hopefully you've seen the picture that goes with this. The goal was for us to capture the entire island of Iwo Jima. It's a small island off the coast of Japan, because we wanted to provide a safe place for us to launch off of for our eventual invasion of Japan, which I'll get to that in just a second. We were severely outnumbered in Japan, but we persevered. Now, if you've ever seen this picture before, this is the famous picture of them on Mount Sibachi. Kiribachi? American soldiers putting up the flag. There is a World War II memorial in Washington, D.C. that looks exactly like this. This picture was actually taken near the beginning / middle of the battle. The battle was not over at all when they did this, but it just signified that they were capturing it. And if you see on this picture here, Iwo Jima is right there, little tiny dot right there. But eventually America was planning on invading Japan. Here's Japan. Hi, Japan. We were planning on invading Japan, so we thought if we can get the island nearest to it, we could launch our planes off of there and bomb the crap out of Japan. Bear with me on that because that's not actually what happened. All right, next, my personal favorite, we got the Battle of Okinawa. Now, bear with me on this. All right, this was one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific. This happened in 1945. So look at the date here, April 1st to June 22nd of 1945. During this time, the war in Europe ended. Okay, Hitler killed himself on April 30th, 1945. The Nazis surrendered in early May of 1945. So if you look at this, the war in Europe was done. The war in Africa was long over for 2 years, right? But the war in the Pacific was still happening. And now, America, right? We won the war in Europe. We won the war in Africa. Okay, well, we fought in Africa, but not a whole lot. That was mostly the British Empire that did that, as I talked about earlier, right? So now we're focusing on the Pacific. We got all of our manpower focused in the Pacific now, okay? Battle of Okinawa, though, this was the last final battle of World War II, period. We got the Battle of Okinawa, like I said. It is a tiny island off the mainland of Japan, all right? A lot of people died here. Okay. A lot of people died. This battle proved a lot of things. Okay, and I'll get to that here in just a second. So there is Japan, there's Okinawa. It's just right there, tiny little island. Fun facts. My grandfather fought in this battle. Grandpa Kanka, he fought in Okinawa. He was in the army. He was responsible for killing some Japanese soldiers, but his main job was to actually clean up the dead bodies and the blood and the carnage after the battle had ended. So talk about a horrific job, right? We're in the Pacific Islands. It is hot and humid all the time. I'm talking like 100 degrees, 1,000,000,000% humidity. So imagine what the dead bodies looked like after even a day of sitting in the sun. Right. So that was his job, and it actually scarred him for life for it. I always remember my grandfather to be very warm, though. So in terms of PTSD, I don't think he suffered from it all too well, all too much, I mean, which is good. But anyway, I have some pictures that follow that are him on the island. My dad was also stationed in the army in Okinawa in the 70s. So it's kind of cool that like my grandfather and his son, my dad, were stationed in the same place, but my grandfather experienced war and my dad didn't. I mean, as you can imagine in the 70s, right? It was a little better time. Anyway, the Battle of Okinawa also proved that Japan was not going to give in. So again, we already talked about their fighting style. Japan was relentless. They're not going to give up. Death doesn't scare them, and that is the worst enemy to have because there's not a whole lot we could do to scare them. Even the Battle of Okinawa, look how many casualties in this battle. Japan suffered 77,000 deaths in the Battle of Okinawa, and they still weren't ready to give up. So America had two choices ahead of them. Do we invade Japan and go for Tokyo, their capital city, or Kyoto, right? Or do we do something even more drastic? So America was left with those two options. What do we do? And if you know anything about history, I think you know what option they picked. We'll get to that later. So here's a picture of my grandfather. He is standing next to a few dead bodies. He's carrying what looks like a stretcher, and you can see the guy in the corner of the picture has a shovel. So they were either going to bury these bodies, dig up their bodies. Obviously, the main goal when you fight a war overseas, the whole goal is to bring that body back for a proper burial, either in Arlington National Cemetery in DC, well, Arlington, Virginia, right outside of Washington, DC, so their family can have a proper goodbye. But sometimes with bodies being so mutilated in war, or if they're just in parts, it's not always possible, right? Here he is again, standing next to a few more dead bodies. You can see the wreckage behind him as well. First of all, the row of dead bodies, and you can also just see destructive things in the background as well. My grandpa did something that he probably shouldn't have done either. He took these photographs off of dead Japanese soldiers. So you can see the reason why I'm showing you this is because we talk about, well, mostly me, because you guys aren't talking back to me right now. I'm talking about this from, like, the Japanese are tenacious. They don't give up. They're not afraid to die, but they were also human, as everyone involved in war tends to be, right? So they were human. They had families back home that they loved. They had family traditions. They had loved ones. They had friends that they would just go hang out with all the time. They would do stuff with their friends, and they had parents that loved them so much back home. And so this kind of shows the humanity of it. And also the lack of humanity in war, right? Is because these pictures, again, were taken off of dead bodies. So my grandpa was going through the cleanup crew, really not supposed to go through a dead man's things in war. But a lot of people did, all throughout every single war ever. It's just not seen as the most respectful thing. It's not a crime per se. It's just not very respectful, Grandpa. Right? And there's also a postcard that is written entirely in Japanese. If any of you know Japanese, please reach out, because I would love to have it translated. I would love to see what this soldier said to his folks, or what his folks said to him. I think that would be really cool. We'll stop there. In my next video, we'll focus on the Manhattan Project. All right. Thank you.